besides DUIs, do other things? What else do you cover? What else is in your practice wheel?
So pretty much anything that lands somebody in these bad boys, I'm in. You're going to get people out of the cuffs, out of jail, connect them with the resources they need to get back on track. I do a lot of domestic violence cases. Unfortunately, with the lockdowns and our pandemic, people have been stuck at home with people they thought they loved, and that's not working out as well as we'd hoped. So I'm picking up a lot of newer domestic violence cases and getting great results in them. The most common domestic violence call I get is somebody calling me Monday morning saying, "Hey, I had my baby mama arrested Friday night, and now I want to drop the charges." I say, well, it's not quite that simple. Once you've called the police and they've made the arrest, it's not the alleged victim who's pressing the case anymore, pressing the charges. It's the government. Okay. So they can't just retract and drop the whole thing. We've got a case. So the best thing they can do is hire a great attorney to represent the defendant, bring in all the mitigation stuff. And ultimately, if we need to, we set the case for trial. And sometimes that complaining witness isn't available for trial, and that leads to a dismissal. So there are all kinds of things that we can do there. But a lot of different kinds of cases. I do vandalism cases, drug cases, gun cases, assaults with a deadly weapon cases. I've had robbery cases. I handled a double 7-Eleven robbery case a while back where we got a probation deal and then went back and did an expungement on a 2-strike case.
Oh, wow.
So, with the right attorney who's willing to fight, things are possible in all kinds of cases.
But let's go. I wanted to go back to DV. Like, what's a common misperception? Like, so, walk me through some of that. Like, what are you commonly dealing with? You mentioned a little bit, but I want you to dive in a little bit deeper.
Sure. So, I mean, every case is different. Sometimes it's a nosy neighbor who called the cops and the alleged victim wasn't even somebody who thought they needed the police in this situation. But now the police are there. Every department I know of has a policy that says they're going to take somebody out of that situation, which means they're taking somebody to jail. They're going to do their best to figure out who the aggressor was. Sometimes they can't. So they just kind of, flip a coin and arrest somebody, but that kicks off a whole case. Wow. Then it goes, they're going to always call that arrest a felony arrest under 273.5. Very often, depending on the facts, those will end up getting filed as a misdemeanor case rather than a felony. But the fact that they make it a felony arrest has repercussions down the line for one thing, what shows up on somebody's background check. But also, if we're able to get the case dismissed or we get a DA reject on the case, we have to wait 3 years on a felony arrest before we can get the arrest record sealed. Versus on a misdemeanor arrest, it would only be 1 year before we can do a sealing. So every little detail in these cases has an impact in the long term. Domestic violence cases run the gamut. I mean, I've had somebody who, allegedly whacked her boyfriend with a guitar. I've had cases of, people throwing potted plants or vases. I've had obviously, grabbing an arm and leaving a bruise. I've had a wide range of situations where, a domestic violence arrest gets made. And then in those cases, it's important to get an attorney involved early. They may cite you out and give you a court date 3 or 4 months from now. But by then, if you wait and hire an attorney, a lot of the evidence is gone. I want to see, were there bruises? What's going on here? Is there any video around that might be helpful? And I'm going to call the detective early on in the case and try to explain what's going on and say, hey, I was just contacted by the victim in this case who doesn't want to go forward. They're not going to drop it based on that, but it kind of changes the way they're thinking about the case. And they'll call and verify. They're not going to take my word for it. But helping them say, yeah, this was all a misunderstanding. Yeah, like they've never heard that before, right? But it's helpful to get in their ear early, influence what goes into the report, that then influences what goes to the prosecutor's office that those government attorneys are looking at when they're considering filing a case. And then I'll also call at that stage and talk to the DAs and say, hey, what's going on in this case? You got these issues. The police, didn't really have reason to go into the house. That's a Fourth Amendment issue. How about you go ahead and slide this one over to an office hearing or a misdemeanor, worst case. Don't do a felony filing here, and we'll work on it from there. So we can have a lot of influence on, how those cases are filed, which has a huge influence on the longer term, how they end up, right? If a case is filed as a felony and we can manage to plea it to a misdemeanor, that's a great result.
Right.
But if it's filed as a misdemeanor and now we're looking at trying to get some sort of a diversion or get it dismissed, I mean, that's an even better result, right? So being able to influence it at that filing level makes a big difference in those kinds of cases.
Right.
And then, the LA City Attorney's Office has an office hearing program where, in sort of their weaker, lower level cases, instead of filing a case in court, they'll shift it over to a hearing officer and do what they call an office hearing. Now, you need an attorney for that also. And every office hearing I've been involved in has not resulted in them filing a case. It's a fishing expedition where the hearing officer is there asking questions. They want the defendant to testify and maybe give them more evidence that will, give them what they need to turn around and file the case in court. We're not going to let that happen. But we're going to go in with mitigation and show you, look, my guy's already doing counseling. He's been doing what the court would order as a domestic violence program, their 52-week, anger management program. He's taking positive steps to improve his life and to respond better in this situation in the future. So this is not a guy you need to worry about. And it's not a guy where you need to file this case. And then when the case isn't filed, or if it gets dismissed in court, then we go back and we file a motion to seal the arrest records. So then the defendant can legally answer they've never even been arrested. So that's huge for their future.
That's huge. That's a great, I would have never even thought about that for you. That makes perfect sense.